What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now. I'm Alex, and in this video, I want to talk about those Batman Arkham Asylum remake rumors. Now, there's kind of two parts to this, at least, that I want to discuss, right? There's, like, the validity of the actual rumor, and then there's my opinion that this thing is probably going to happen no matter what. Now, in terms of where this comes from Vera Dark. Now, I don't know too much about this person, other than that they kind of get themselves wrapped up, maybe purposely, in the, woke, anti-woke kind of war. Now, she says that the same sources that told her that layoffs were incoming months ago, and they were correct, tell me they've internally greenlit a remake of Arkham Asylum and will potentially be continuing the Arkhamverse with the Origins voice cast. They recently got back together and did Arkham Shadows with Camouflage. So, I don't know about her, like, past track record. I think it's probably pretty easy to say that, and I think, like, anybody that actually saw Suicide Squad, right? Like, it comes out, it does what it did, and then you say, yeah, that studio is going to be fine. I think most people think that, no, they're going to suffer some sort of consequences, right? There's going to be layoffs. There's going to be some sort of like the corporate heads are going to come down on them, right? And they're probably going to be told what to do for their next game. I thought that I saw her say something like they were going to get shut down, and I could be making that up, so I don't want to, I'm not saying that as a fact. I thought that I once saw her say that Rocksteady was going to shut down, and to me, that would say, okay, if she actually said that, obviously that didn't happen, so I really don't trust her, but, I don't know, like, this is a person that, like, maybe knows her stuff, probably, in my opinion, doesn't. I think it's just kind of common knowledge. Now, here's the split, though, right? So in terms of, like, do I believe this actual rumor that because she says so, they're making Arkham Asylum? No, I'm not going to necessarily trust her. However, I will say, if you go back just like a month or two ago, I believe I literally made a video why I think Arkham Asylum is going to get a remake. So here's where I kind of stand on it. I think it'll eventually happen. And I think it's eventually going to happen, not because it should, but because it will. And I said this actually on Twitter, right? There's a difference between a game needing a remake and a game getting a remake because the corporate executives say so. And I think Arkham Asylum, I think the game still holds up. I replayed it actually for the 15-year anniversary just this past August. Now, I did the whole Return to Arkham thing, and, in some ways it's better, in some ways it's worse, right? They got the coloring and some of, like, the tone down wrong, and, you could argue in terms of, like, the visual style, it might actually be the, like, a worse product. They actually went backwards with the remaster versus forward, but I will say, the game does hold up. However, like, would it be a candidate for a remake? It absolutely would. You could improve pretty much everything about this game through a remake. And I'm not saying, like, you change. I guess here's the thing to kind of clarify what I just said. The game is a masterpiece, okay? The game, let me just tell you from playing it, the game still holds up, okay? This is a phenomenal game. It's a little rough around the edges, but it's the start of an incredible trilogy. And I've always said this, it's my favorite Arkham game. It's not necessarily the best. Probably City might be considered the best by, like, the majority of people, but I think in terms of, like, my personal favorites, which is different than the best one, right? I think Asylum is my favorite. I think it's just kind of got everything. The pacing is unbelievably good. Kind of going through, like, the rogue gallery, right? Like, it's just such an incredible game, and it's old. Honestly, you could say, okay, well, does it need a remake versus, like, will it get a remake? Well, or, like, do they want it to get a remake? It's a 15-year-old game that started one of the most important franchises in gaming, okay? And I'm going to stop there because that's enough for any corporate executive to say, yep, that's the one. Like, that's it. That's honestly it. This is a game, and here's the thing, we're all suckers. We would all buy this thing. Like, I don't want to necessarily speak for you. Let me just speak for me. I would buy it. I'd be the sucker. Asylum is freaking phenomenal. I just said it's my favorite one. Of course, if they were to remake it and not change things, right? You improve it. You improve the visuals. Maybe it's not so rough around the edges. You can only do so much because it is, like, the first one of, again, this kind of grand trilogy, which became more with Origins and, Shadows even recently, right? So it's, I guess, kind of supposed to be a little rough around the edges, by the way, but, I do think a remake works. I think there's things that you can remake in it, right? But I'm not talking about, like, a Final Fantasy VII thing, even though I'm kind of in support of that one. I'm not talking about those. I'm not talking that you go in and you freaking change up the story. You keep it, you do not touch it. The story in that game, the pace, and maybe, like, the ending was a little off, but, who cares? That's a product of what they did back then, okay? The game, in terms of the story and the pacing and the characters and all that stuff, plot stuff, you do not touch that in any degree. And also, you probably can't even add stuff because of Kevin Conroy, and I don't really think you need to, right? Leave it alone, but you just refine everything. And I think that's what they would do, or at least that's what I actually would hope they would do. But I think here's the final part to this. It would sell. This is a game that would absolutely, so you put out a remake of it, and, you know, in terms of Rocksteady and in terms of why I do think her rumor is believable, okay, what would make sense for Rocksteady to do? Well, a Batman game, okay? Everybody knows that, right? Whether it's the right thing to do is also kind of separate, right? What makes the most sense for Rocksteady to do from them and from WB looking at them? It is a Batman game, right? Rocksteady's got the name. It doesn't have the talent that it had back then, but it has the name, and they are known for Batman. Not necessarily the people, but the name Rocksteady is known for Batman, right? So it makes 1,000% sense to do Batman. Okay, well, what do you do? Well, in my opinion, there's probably only two choices. I mean, there's maybe more, but like two that come to the top of my head. You put another game in between Origin, Shadows, and Asylum, right? You do another kind of prequel one. And it really actually is lining up that would make a lot of sense, and I think that's what should happen. Okay, you got that. And then Arkham Asylum Remake. I think those are honest. I mean, you could go Batman Beyond, and there's other things you can do for sure. I'm not saying those don't exist. But I do think, like, continuing, like, brand new story. I'll always take, like, a new thing versus an old thing. Let me just say that. So, you know, like, while I've kind of supported the idea of a remake here, I mean, if they wanted to tell a brand new thing, that's fine. However, here's the thing. If you don't trust Rocksteady, which I think many of us don't, or at least the trust has been shaken, I think that could be fair to say, right? Well, what would you want them to do now? Do you want them to tell another story in the Arkhamverse? Because they just did that with Suicide Squad. How did that go, right? So you want them to go back to Batman. I mean, you want them to keep working, right? WB wants them to keep working. Well, what makes the most sense for them to do? Well, if you don't want them to screw anything up, if you want them to kind of do like a prove it project, right? And maybe it's like go back to the drawing board, like take one of the all-time greats and a game that literally made Rocksteady. You take that game and you remake it, almost as like a test, right? You can't really mess that up. And if you somehow manage to, you're in deep, deep trouble, right? But if you succeed with it, well, maybe you prove yourself and then you make a brand new Arkham game, right? Or, I mean, again, you could go reverse. You could make a new Arkham game, but they just made a new Arkham game in a sense. The Arkhamverse, right? And again, we saw how that turned out. So I think an Arkham Asylum remake might actually be the safest thing they could possibly do because it involves like the smallest amount of tinkering, right? Like they can't really add anything to Arkham Asylum without really pissing people off. So I don't know. That's just kind of my thoughts on it. I do believe, and I've said this so much, you know, again, I'm not saying remake everything. Okay, there are like select games I do want remade or remastered. I'm a big preservation guy, right? I have a whole third channel talking about it. But again, like the difference is what deserves to be remade versus what will be remade. I think you can remake Asylum. I think it actually is a worthy remake candidate, okay? It's 15 years old. Like, it's getting up there. Like, it is a game and I've said this before, even like Kingdom Hearts. Kingdom Hearts 1 is 22 or so years old. I really think eventually Square Enix will remake Kingdom Hearts 1. That one I really don't want to happen, but I mean, like, it makes sense. Like, and I think a lot of those games make sense. And honestly, I would take Arkham Asylum being remade over an 8-year-old game getting remade every other day nowadays anyway, right? I mean, we're getting so many games getting remasters and remakes now that don't really need it. And there are games, not necessarily Asylum, but there are games trapped on the PS3 and 360 gen or even PS2 era games that are still there, you know, and I would actually prefer they get some treatment before these other ones. It's the same thing here. I think there's games that deserve it more than Arkham Asylum. And again, like, there's risk involved there, but I do think as an executive, as a prove it kind of thing for Rocksteady, like all things considered, I think an Arkham Asylum remake actually does make a ton of sense. So let me know what you guys think in the comments. Make sure, as always, you're subscribed to the channel, bell icon turned on. I hope to see you all on the next one.